your need. Jehovah Rapha, heal your body. Jehovah Shalom, be your peace. Jehovah Nissi, fight your battles. Jehovah Jireh, meet your need. Jehovah Rapha, heal your body. Jehovah Shalom, be your peace, is who he is. Jehovah Nissi, fight your battles. He'll meet every need. Jehovah Jireh, meet your need. He's a healer. Jehovah Rapha, heal your body, gives you peace. Jehovah Shalom, Jehovah Nissi, fight your battles. Jehovah Jireh, meet your need, heal your body. Jehovah Rapha, heal your body. Jehovah Shalom, be your peace. Call the name, call the name, call the name, call the name. Jehovah, all I praise, all I praise, all I praise belongs to you. Call the name, call the name, call the name. Jehovah, all I praise, all I praise, all I praise belongs to you. Jehovah Nissi, fight your battles. Jehovah Jireh, meet your need. Jehovah Rapha, heal your body. Jehovah Shalom, be your peace. Jehovah Nissi, fight your battles. Jehovah Jireh, meet your need. Jehovah Rapha, heal your body. Jehovah Shalom, be your peace. Only one who you say you are, so we worship you.
Welcome to Forge this morning. It's my pleasure and privilege to welcome you, particularly if you are new or visiting, and if you're part of friends or family, for those people who are being baptized today. We are so excited, and one of the reasons we sang that song to start with is because we really want to celebrate today all of the things that God is doing in and through the lives of those 7 people who are being baptized. And we're going to hear a couple of their stories throughout this morning's session, but it's really exciting. We're also really excited because today is a very special day in our church life because it is our group's launch day. For us as a church, we believe that we go further faster in relationship and life is better connected. And so what we have is we have a sort of a selection of groups that happen midweek, online and in person, for an opportunity for people to get together and to be able to connect together to go further, faster in faith and just in general in life. And so that's happening today. We're launching those groups that will be starting in September. But we're also in week 2 of our series, which says, God Save the King. And in just a little bit, Steve is going to come and share perhaps a not so well-known story from the life of King David.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome to all of those people in the side room over there. Can you just give them a little wave? Because they're just a little bit out of the side. Just a little wave over there. That would be good. That would be. Hey, look, if this is your first time or if you are visiting because of the baptisms that are going to be taking place, you are especially welcome. We're just delighted that you're here. And I hope that you find it helpful enough so that you might even consider coming back at another time. We are into this series. This is the second week of the series, which we've entitled God Save the King. Now, of course, this year has been the coronation year of King Charles III, and that happened a couple of months ago. And earlier on this week, he went up to Scotland to try and convince them, didn't he? And we had that event taking place too. But this series isn't based around Charles III, okay? It's not. It would be interesting, I know that, but that's why we have The Crown. Just go to Netflix, you'll be able to find all about him, okay? So, no, we're focusing on another king, a man called King David. And as we jump into today's story, which, as Em said, is not going to be that well known to lots of you, we're going to be reminded of something that is relevant to every single one of us, whether it's now or whether it's in the future. Because of this. That living God's way, or even if you don't believe in God, or doing the right thing, is least appealing when we're angry, lonely, or afraid. Now, whether you're a follower of Jesus, or whether you're an agnostic or an atheist, this is still true. That we have to be on our guard, because when we make decisions, when we're angry, lonely, or afraid, it nearly always puts us into trouble, and it nearly always leads to regrets. Some of our biggest regrets have been because we've done something or we've said something because we were angry or because we were lonely or because we were afraid. And what happens is that we end up feeling angrier. We end up feeling lonelier, and we end up feeling afraider or more afraid. So I want to look through a story involving David, who later became this very famous king of Israel. But like our present king, King David had some flaws to him. And those flaws had some devastating effects. When he had two big times when he made some really big mistakes. So if you're sitting here today, or you're watching online today, because I want to welcome you as well. Thank you for joining us. And you're thinking, well, I've already messed up. Well, you need to know that there is a character in the Bible who messed up big time, probably bigger than the mess ups that you have made. And yet he was still able to know God and to know God's forgiveness and God's faithfulness. So David messed up once when he was in his 50s, which is, anyone here in their 50s? Thank you, that's right. Good. That's two of us. All right. Okay, that's good. And when he messed up in his 50s, he committed adultery. It ended in a murder of a man and also the loss of a child. It was horrendous. But there was another time where David made a big error in his 20s. And again, that had devastating effects. And so we're going to be thinking about that story today. So what I want you to do is I want you to be thinking, as you listen to this story and as we go through this part of David's story, I want you to be thinking more Game of Thrones than EastEnders, okay? More Game of Thrones than EastEnders, because this happened about 3,000 years ago, and so there was a lot more kind of tribal living in those days. So David, when he was 15, he went forward on behalf of the whole Israel army, and he killed the giant that the Philistines had put all of their hope in, the enemies of Israel, a man called Goliath. And David had killed Goliath. It was an amazing story. In fact, you can find out about it if you log on to our website and you can listen to Emily's talk from last week, because it was excellent. And David was someone who put his hope in God. And so he never claimed that he was the one who was the fantastic one. He always pushed it to say, no, God's the one who worked through me. God's the one in whom I have my hope. And so Em encouraged us last week to be coming up with these words. In you, Lord, my God, I put my trust. My hope is in you all day long. That's what David wrote because that was his experience. Anyway, David became this national hero. He was a child hero. He was 15 years of age. And what happened is that the people were so behind him, were so for this young lad, that they started to sing songs about him because that's what people do when they have heroes. Have you thought of that? Well, I thought of that just a few weeks ago when I went to a place called Edgbaston, which is in Birmingham, and there's this thing called a cricket ground there. And I went to the last day of the first test of the Ashes. And I know some of you are going to switch off, but hang on, it's all right. I'm not going to be talking about the cricket. I'm going to be talking about the Barmy Army. Because there are these group of England followers who are so passionate about England. Whenever they have a hero, they make a song up about him. And so I sat in the Holly stand, which is where all of the Barmy Army were. There was a trumpeter in front of me leading the singing. And then so when this man came onto bowl, they went like this. They went, "Oh, Jimmy, Jimmy. Jimmy, 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 Jimmy." That's what they did. Anderson. That's what they did. And they went over and over and over and over until the over finished. It's good, eh? And then Ollie Robinson came on. So Ollie Robinson, he's another one of our England bowlers. So when he came on, they of course started to sing his song to him, which is this. And here's to you, Ollie Robinson. England loves you more than you would know. And that's what they would do. And they would sing it. And the trumpet player would be going as well. And so there was all of this singing towards the heroes of the England team. But they didn't limit it to that. They had a song about everything. I'll tell you. So when a man called Steve Smith, I know. He used to be the Australian captain. He's a brilliant batsman. He's so annoying. He is so good. So when he came out to bat, they remembered something of what had happened just a few years ago when he cheated on the cricket field and he was found out, and then he came on TV to apologize. And he cried on TV. Cry on the telly. We saw you cry on the telly. Cry on the telly. That's what they did. Over and over and over again. It was wonderful. I'll tell you, it was wonderful. So, after David had killed Goliath, the Barmy Army of the time started to make up songs about David. But of course, David wasn't king at this point. A man called Saul was king at this point. And so they made up this song. And in fact, it was a very, very similar song. And it went like this. Saul's killed his thousands, but David's killed tens of thousands, killed tens of thousands. And they were singing this over and over again. Now, Saul was a very insecure man. Saul became very, very jealous because, as you will see, he's lacking. Yeah, he's lacking. David has done so much more than he has, and David was the popular one within the country. And so Saul became very jealous, and he decided to do a few things. One, he decided to try and bring David into his family so that he could try and control him. And he would say, David, there's a battle going on there. I think you need to go and lead that battle. Desperately hoping that David would be killed so that he would be out of the way and Saul would have his popularity back again. The problem is that every time David went out, he kept winning. So, of course, even more, the song got sung. And so then Saul said, well, you can marry my daughter. So he married Michal as the daughter. And David became best friends with Saul's son, Jonathan. They were such close buddies. It was such an intense friendship. Now, Saul, because he was jealous of David, one time he got so angry and so mad. While David was there in the room, he picked up his spear and he threw it to try and kill David. And David managed to move out of the way and he ran away. And he knew that his life was at risk. But things came to a head one mealtime. Now, eating at the king's table, or as it would be today, was an incredible honor. And David was always invited to eat at the king's table. But because of the nervousness that he had about this man Saul, sometimes he would make excuses and he would stay away. Well, one day, Saul was sitting down, having his meal. Lots of his family and those invited were sitting there. And he looked out and he said, "Where's David? Where's David?" And Jonathan said, David asked if he could go and visit his family in Bethlehem. And Saul lost it. He absolutely lost it. This is how the Bible records it. Saul boiled with rage at Jonathan. "You stupid son of a whore," he swore at him. Now, if his wife was there, probably a bit of marriage counseling might have been needed just off the back of that. It's not the most tender term to call your wife at that part. But he was livid. He was absolutely livid. And then he went on to say this. He says, "Do you think I don't know that you want him to be king in your place, shaming yourself and your mother? As long as that son of Jesse is alive," that's David, "you'll never be king. Now go and get him so I can kill him." So there were some parental issues probably as well. I'm just sensing that too. So Jonathan leaves and he goes to find David, who's hiding, and he tells him to leave town. In fact, you've got to leave the country because it's no longer safe here. So at this point in the story, David is now 22 years of age. He's angry at Saul because Saul should not be threatening his life. He's lonely because he's having to separate himself and he fears for his life. Angry, lonely, and fearful. 3 things that can lead us to making bad decisions, decisions that we will regret later. And David did what many of us do when we get angry, when we get lonely, or when we get fearful, that he panicked. And he took matters into his own hands, and he did something that he would so regret later. And actually, that's what we do. It is what we do. We say things out of anger that we should never have said. Ever done that? Yeah? Okay, it's just me. Fine. When we feel lonely, we find comfort in stuff or people that we know is wrong, but we just want to feel better in the moment. Ever done that? Just me. When we're afraid, we think we've got to get out of trouble, so we'll lie or we'll manipulate or we'll steal or we'll do something to get out of trouble. I know you've done that. Well, David decided to visit the high priest of the day, a man named Ahimelech. And when Ahimelech saw David arriving, he got really nervous because David was coming by himself. And David never went anywhere by himself. He always had soldiers. He had his warriors always with him. And so this is how it's recorded in 1 Samuel 21. Ahimelech trembled when he saw him. "Why are you alone?" he asked. "Why is no one with you?" And then David did something that he's not known for, but in the worry and the fear of the moment, he did something that he knew was wrong. Basically, he lied. It's not a huge lie, but he tells a lie. And what's really strange is David, who loved God, David wanted to live for God. He did. And David knew the 10 Commandments. In fact, the place where he was at in meeting up with this man called the high priest Ahimelech, the actual stone tablets that the 10 Commandments were written on were really close. And he knew what the 9th command was, which is, "You shall not lie." So he knew this. But because he's angry, because he's isolated, and because he's afraid, he goes against what he knows to be right. And he says this, he says, "The king has sent me on a private matter. He told me not to tell anyone why I'm here, and I have told my men to meet me later." Now, it wasn't a secret mission. He didn't have any men, and he was afraid that if Ahimelech knew the truth, he wouldn't help him. So he takes matters into his own hand, and he lies. And ultimately, that lie was going to cost the high priest's life. David asked Ahimelech for some food, and Ahimelech was still really confused because he's saying, if the king has sent you on a mission, surely he'd have sent you out with some food and some provisions. But this is what, when David asked him for food, he said this: "We don't have any regular bread," the priest replied, "but there is holy bread." Now, holy bread is not badly made bread with huge holes in it, okay, just in case you were concerned. This was bread which had been set aside as part of their worship to God. In other words, it was just an act of saying, God, you've given us so much, and we present this to you. So it was never intended for David. But David took it. And then he said this. He said, "Have you got any weapons?" He says, "Do you have a spear or sword?" The king's business was so urgent that I didn't even have time to grab a weapon. In other words, the lies are starting to build here. He's trying to cover his tracks. He's fearing for his life, and so he wants a weapon. And Ahimelech said, he says, "I've got one weapon here. It's the weapon that you gave 7 years ago. It's Goliath's sword." Now, when he heard that, he should have automatically thought, of course, God went before me there. God will go before me now. But he doesn't. And he takes the sword and he makes his way off again. Now, why did David act so differently at the age of 22 than when he was at the age of 15? Well, when he was 15, he was fearless. He was brave, he was humble, he was God-honoring. When he was a boy at the age of 15, he would run towards danger, not run away from it. He was a songwriter who wrote these words: "I will fear no evil, for you are with me." So at the age of 22, where the heck has his faith gone? Where's his confidence in God gone? What's happened? Well, the answer is found in 3 words. It's these 3 words: fear, anger, loneliness. Those 3 things have the potential to cause us to forget the battles that we've won in the past. Those times when we've overcome temptation, or we've beaten the drink problem, or we've worked to get out of debt. These 3 giants here have the potential to undermine our faith in God. And fear, anger, and loneliness have the potential to mess up our lives and the lives of others around us. And this is where the story of David 3,000 years ago, remember Game of Thrones, you've got to think it's that tribe. This is where his strange story starts to interact with our story. Because when we need God the most, it's often at the time we are least likely to turn to him. When we need God the most, it's often the least likely that we will actually turn to him. And that when we feel angry and isolated and afraid, it's the time that we're most likely to make a poor decision. And do you know what? It's really easy to see in others. You will have friends who will have made some bad decisions, or might even be making bad decisions today. And you kind of think, oh, come on, sort your life out. What you're doing is stupid. You're wrecking your life. And it's really easy to be able to see it in other people and offer suggestions of what they should do. But when it comes to us, we're almost blind to it because we think that our situation is different. Because that's what David thought. And maybe he thought as we often think, which is this: that if God were with me, this wouldn't be happening to me. You know, there is something that I've learned over the years of being a follower of Jesus that is obvious, but it's really profound. That when life is going well, when things are easy, when we have all that we need, it is so easy to trust God. It really is. Really easy to trust him. It's easy to sing the songs that we've been singing today. It's easy to serve and to give and to join a group because, that's what God would want for me. And it's really easy when life is going well. It's easy to trust God when we have nothing to trust him with and nothing to trust him for. But it's harder to trust him when something of value starts slipping away. And David ignores God. Ignores everything he knows to be right, and he takes the sword and he flees. This is stupid, but he flees to the land of the Philistines, who were the enemies that he'd beaten 7 years ago. And he goes to the king and he says, I want to swap sides, please. I want to fight against my... And they go, we know who you are. You're David. We recognize that sword. That was Goliath's sword. And David suddenly realized that once again, his life was in jeopardy. And so he feigned insanity. He started to scratch against the walls. He started to dribble and slobber and shake his head. And they thought, who is this man? And a king eventually said, we've got enough nutters around here. Can you get rid of him, please? And they cast him out, and he was able to make his way to safety again. You see, oh, goodness. David then recognized what he'd done. But it was too late for the consequences that came from his stupidity. It was too late. Because while he was getting food and picking up the sword from Ahimelech, someone else was watching. A man named Doeg, who was the king's chief herdsman. And he saw David meeting with Ahimelech. And he makes his way back to King Saul. And he says that David has been meeting with this high priest, you know. And so King Saul is furious, and he summons Ahimelech and his family to come to him. And he says, why have you and David conspired against me? And this is Ahimelech, because he doesn't know what's going on. This is his response. Is that going to be able to come out? Yes. But sir, is there anyone amongst all your servants as faithful as David, your son-in-law? Why, he's the captain of your bodyguard and a highly honored member of your household. This was certainly not the first time that I'd consulted God for him, and may the king not accuse me and my family for this matter, for I knew nothing at all of any plot against you. And he didn't. He was speaking the truth. But David's lies had now involved him. Goes on, you will surely die, Ahimelech, along with your entire family, the king shouted. So he ordered for his soldiers to kill the high priest there and then with his family. And they all said no, because they didn't want to kill a high priest. And so he turns, the king then said to Doeg, he says, you do it. So Doeg turned on them and killed them that day. 85 priests in all, still wearing their priestly garments. See? Game of Thrones. This is what's happening here. Then he went to the town of the priests and killed the priests' families, men and women and children and babies, and all the cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats. And only Abiathar, one of the sons of Ahimelech, escaped and fled to David. And when he told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord, David exclaimed, I knew it. When I saw Doeg the Edomite there that day, I knew he was sure to tell Saul. And this is it. This is where David realizes what he's done. Now I have caused the death of all your father's family. David was responsible for the death of an entire village because of taking matters into his own hands and allowing anger and fear to drive his decisions. Now, you might be thinking, blimey, came for a baptism. What is going on here? Well, what I want to do is, as we finish, I want to ask some questions real quick, okay, about how this story might still be relevant and intersect with your life and with mine. Because the story might be a bit Games of Thrones style, but the theme is, honestly, it's common to us all. There's going to come a time when anger or fear pushes us to do things that we shouldn't do, to say things that we shouldn't do. And our sense of isolation or our sense of loneliness within a relationship perhaps causes us to consider things that we would never advise anyone else to do, but it becomes a live option for us. Why? Because those three emotions are incredibly, incredibly powerful. So, 4 questions to consider. First one is this one here. What's your loneliest anger or fear causing you to consider that you've not considered before? What is your loneliness, anger, or fear causing you to consider that you've not considered before? Might be relationally, might be financially, it might be physically, some kind of risk that you would never take before, but because of fear or because of anger, you choose to take a step that way. Maybe it's even an old habit which you'd given up on. You turned your back on it, but all of a sudden, because you're lonely, you're starting to think, I might go back and do that again. At least I felt comforted in the moment. So what is your loneliness, anger, or fear causing you to consider that you'd not considered before? And you can slightly change the question, because this does become very personal. Because it could be this: who is your loneliness, anger, or fear causing you to consider that you should not consider? Maybe there's been a potential for a relationship in the past and you've said no to it because you know that it would be wrong. You haven't acted on it. But things are happening in your life now and you're kind of thinking, well, just maybe that's something I could pick up on. It might be something at home or financially or some other area of your life. You know it's the wrong decision, but there is something inside of you now that's pulling hard. And here's the wake-up call, the wake-up question, because some of you will know the outcomes of this. This is the question that David completely missed when he decided to lie to Ahimelech. He was 22 years old, so I can't blame him. But it's this one here. Who, besides you, do your considerations put at risk? So if you were to act on those strong emotions, taking you in the wrong direction, who would it affect? Actually, I know who it would affect. It would affect the people that you love the most and the people who love you the most. Because some of you know through personal experience, maybe you've got a dad whose anger used to get out of control and you're still trying to get some help for that years later because he allowed anger to be expressed so inappropriately. Maybe you had a mum who was incredibly lonely and she found comfort in drink or comfort in something else. And again, that's something that you as a child have had to learn to deal with and to come to terms with. You know that actions never just stay with one person. It always affects other people. Let me ask one more question before I finish. The final question is this: what advice would you give someone who is you? In other words, think of the situation that if someone else was in your situation, what advice would you give them? And then what advice would you therefore give to you? Because for someone else, it's so clear. You can tell them. But when it's you and me, well, we think we're an exception to the rule. And do you know what? We are not. You are a unique person. You are, but your experience is not unique. You are a special person. You are, but your experience is not special. You're a one-of-a-kind kind of person, but your experience is not one of a kind. Your experience is what everyone else experiences. These paths are well worn. People have made the same mistakes over and over again. That's why it's easy to know what other people ought to do, but we don't apply it to ourselves. What advice would you give someone who is you? David, years later, was able to give himself advice, and it turned his life around. This was the advice that he gave later on in his life. He said this: "The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble." Not a chemical, not alcohol, not an affair, not another person, not a lot of debt, not a new car, not a new house, not something else that you could just put on that list. They're not the places where you can find refuge. David said, no, it's the Lord. He's our refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. A stronghold was a place where you could flee to during a time of war. It was a safe place to go to. And what David, in his advice, after he'd learnt some lessons, was this: God is the relationship that you should run towards when you feel oppressed and when there are times of trouble. David would say, I took refuge in my ability, and my ability just landed me in utter disaster. He goes on to say, those who know your name trust in you, for you, Lord, have never forsaken those who seek you. I thought I'd been forsaken, David would say. but I was mistaken. I thought this wouldn't be happening to me if God was with me, if God was for me. And I felt forsaken, but now I look back, I realize that I wasn't, that God was with me. David would say these words. He would say, I felt forsaken, but I was mistaken. I felt forsaken, but I was mistaken. You know what he would tell you? He would say, don't make that same mistake. Don't make the same mistake that I did. Just go out on your own because God obviously isn't in this. And then for those of you, just very quickly, for those of you who maybe have come to the church for the first time and you've never really thought about the God thing, or, to read those words of David kind of really doesn't mean very much to you, I just want to ask you to consider something which I find amazing. I think this is so powerful that 1,000 years after this event, one of David's future generations, people from his family, he was born in the city of David, and he would look into the eyes of the people around them, people who were angry and people who were lonely and people who were afraid. And he would put himself in the place of where David would write, the Lord is my refuge. He would say this. He would say, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. In other words, Jesus is saying, David could speak about the Lord being a refuge in the past, but now I want you to come to me. Come to me. And he goes on to say this. He says, take my yoke, my burden, my perspective, my worldview. Take my yoke on you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Because when you feel forsaken, you are mistaken. God is with you. That's what Jesus would say. I am with you. I will never leave you. And that's why we're holding baptisms today. We're holding baptisms today because 7 people have been working this out, whether it's over the last few months or over the last number of years, that they have discovered that putting their faith in themselves and allowing emotions to push their decisions just leads into disaster. And they're discovering that when they put their hope, when they put their trust in Jesus, that life takes on a very different meaning and purpose. And that's why we're having some baptisms, because they are demonstrating the change that God has brought to their lives. So I'd love you just to sit back and have a watch of Chloe's story.
Hi, I'm Chloe, and I'm a teaching assistant for a special needs school. And I make a lot of jewellery on the side. Sharon is my mum's work colleague. So I met her through my mum, and she knows me very well. And she invited me to come to the craft fair on the 30th anniversary of the Forge. I just knew it was a craft fair and that I could come and sell some stuff, and that would be that. And I knew that it was at a church, but that I didn't need to be involved in it in any way. I could just come and do my thing and then go if I wanted to. But Sharon was really polite, and she invited me to come to the service as well in between. I'd never been to church, so yeah, it was completely not how I ever thought church would be. I guess because I had like the thoughts of my mum when she always talked about her experiences going to church with my grandma, and I think it was very different for her back then. She always talked about it as if she was like forced to go to church and it was just a done thing and all of those things. So church was never really in my life. And then when I came on that 30th anniversary and Sharon sort of offered and she sort of persuaded me maybe a little bit, and I walked in and it was just nothing like I ever would have thought a church to be. I mean, of course, like you had the band playing and everyone's singing, and the spirit of the place was just like really incredible. But the other thing that really actually made me come back was the second time that I did come back, and Steve was standing at the door of the place, and I just remember him welcoming me with open arms and sort of saying, "Why have you come back?" or "You're here." And I was like, yeah, I'm not really sure why I'm here, but my feet walked me like through the door, so I guess I'm here to stay now. I suppose at school I never really got much of an idea of God and what the church is about and all of those sorts of things, so Alpha really helped me just put a few things that were maybe confusing or missing for me, and no question was like ever so ridiculous that I couldn't ask anything, so I felt welcome enough and in a safe enough environment to be able to ask anything. Sarah's been really great. She's invited me to small groups and talking about it with others that have just done Alpha, and she's just really been a rock for me to go to and to ask any questions. She's really just made me feel like part of a family, and to be baptised, I think it will just also make me, I suppose, accountable for what I do. I'm not so het up on doing everything, which in the past I would have done everything just my way, whereas now I think twice about the way that I maybe go about situations, and again, yeah, getting perspective. I feel a presence, although maybe I haven't had a particular answer. Like, I know in our small group, Sarah had sort of said maybe we should sort of call out to see how God loves us and things like that, but I don't see that as that he's not present just because I haven't received that yet, but I feel like I still feel a presence in my life that I didn't have before.
Hi, my name's Betsy. I'm 9 years old and I love pets, and I've got lots of them myself. Before I came to the Forge, I was tiny and I was very afraid of death, but now I've gone to the Forge church, I've learned that heaven's a thing, and then I will get to meet God and Jesus when I go up there. So there's nothing to be afraid of. I was worried about lots and lots of things before I knew that Jesus and God were a thing. When I'm feeling scared or if I'm feeling nervous about something, I normally go to like a private, quiet place and like play. So like at playtime, I'll go on one of the equipment and then I'll just pray. Praying is the way that helps me calm down, and praying makes me know that God's with me and I shouldn't be nervous. My best friend, she's Hindu, but she also encourages me to get baptised, and she tells me facts about being Christian, and it just makes me feel so happy that although there are different religions, someone's just helping me go through the journey of Christianity. And now she's made me feel so comfortable in being Christian that I now want to get baptised. You should definitely be a Christian because you can pray and know that God's with you. You can always listen to the stories of God and Jesus. You can know that he's always with you, and you should never be afraid. And you should always know that God sent his son to die for us so we could, all of our sin could be forgiven. I want to get baptised because I want everyone to know that I'm a true follower, and I also want people to know that I want to be closer to God than I am right now.
I love that testimony, and I love what she said about Alpha and groups as being a place where she could connect with others and she could find out more. I love from the moment she stepped in with Steve and his like, oh, you come back kind of thing. That's the progression that we want for people here as a church. You know, Steve has shared today about the idea of what fear, anger, and loneliness can do to us, particularly when we are isolated. And that's why as a church that groups are such a fundamental part of who we are. We love gathering here on a Sunday. We love singing. We love being able to learn together and to be able to put the things that we hear here into practice. But one of the best ways we can do that is when we are surrounded by other people. And Chloe's testimony talks about that sense of having other people to cheer her on and to champion her. Sarah, Steve, the people that she met on Alpha. So if you are part of the Forge and you've been part of the Forge for ages, and maybe you've been part of a group but you haven't been one for a while, can I highly recommend that this be the time that you reconnect and you sign up to one. If you're new and visiting and you're intrigued, like Chloe was intrigued at our 30th celebrations in November, then Alpha is also happening as a group. And that is a chance just to come and completely open space to be able to ask questions, find out what it is we believe as Christians, what it is that we believe as a Forged Church, and to ask those questions in a really neutral space. That's one of the groups that's there. If you're somebody who's been a Christian for a long time and you've got questions you want to ask, then there is a group for you. If you want to just hang out with some people, go for a walk, there's a group for you. There is a whole multitude of different groups that you can sign up to. All you need to do is go to our website. You can click on that or scan that QR code. It'll take you to our website, and you can see the groups that we've got available. Some of them are online, some of them are in person, but we hope that we've got the right next step for you this autumn. Okay, so go to there and sign up for those groups. If you're new here and you're visiting and you're like, you know what, I'm not certain about a group, but I'm just intrigued about who you are as a church, then we have got some of these down here on our next step. They're a little welcome pack. We want to welcome you. We want to give you something in your hand that you can go away and read and just find out a little bit more about who we are as a church. There's also a £5 Costa card in there. So if, you know, you're new, this is a good thing to have. Those of you that have been part of the Forge forever, you're not allowed them. They are not for you, okay? These are for people who are visiting. So if you're here for one of the baptisms, then please go down and just grab one. You don't even have to speak to somebody. You can just sidle along and swipe one as you go past. Brilliant. Well, that's been the end of our time here together, but we are going to be going out. And hopefully not us getting too wet, though those getting baptised will be going wet. I think the rain might have just stopped, which will be good. In a minute, we're going to go out through there and we'll gather. If you've got children and you've got them in kids' church, if you can go and collect them, because we love our kids being able to see this as well, particularly as Betsy, one of our own, is being baptised. So if you can go and get that. If some of you are wondering why I've had an outfit change and I'm wearing this lovely lime green T-shirt, if those of you who haven't got kids see somebody in one of these lime green T-shirts, it's because they're a group leader. And so if you want to chat to them about the group that they're running, feel free to chat to them or find out a bit more of the next steps whilst we gather. But it will be about 5 minutes, I reckon, before we are out there. If you want to come back next week, we won't actually be here. We have got our family fun day happening, and that's at Athlington Hall. Athlington, if for those of you that don't live near Debenham, it really is in the middle of nowhere. But it is easy to find, sorry, Mr. Havers, it's easy to find because they have got some amazing log cabins and stuff like that. So if you Google Athlington Hall, you'll find them on the website. But also if you go to our website, you'll have details of where we're meeting and a map to how to get there and the times and stuff like that. It's going to be an amazing day. Hopefully it won't rain, but we'll have lots of fun. We always have lots of fun when we're up at Athlington. But that's the end of me on stage. If you want to go grab your kids, go grab teas and coffees if they're available before the baptism. Chill out for 5 minutes and then we'll see you outside. See you next week.